I'm very excited about talking to our alumni. It's a great pleasure and honor to be part of this. And without further ado, I will start sharing my slides. So today we are going to talk about something that's really relevant to the contemporary workforce. So I'll begin by mentioning some sociological trends. So increasingly a larger number of women in the workforce, more dual earner couples. There is a ton of research on this. And declining birth rates in most of the developed nations. Population is aging globally. The world population, according to UN database, world population of children is about 25%, whereas older, which is defined as 65 years and up, is about 10%. But the percentage of older population is constantly on the rise, whereas the percentage of younger, or in this case children, is decreasing. And these percentages vary drastically across countries. So in the US, for example, these percentages are about 18% children and about 17% elderly. So that's a lot closer. In Japan, the young age group is actually a lot smaller than the older age group, 12% versus almost 29%. So this has implications for the workforce. Basically, we are living and working longer. As we are aging, we are choosing to work longer, sometimes by choice. As we are living longer, we choose to work longer. We enjoy. Many of us, we enjoy our jobs and we just don't want to leave. Also, a lot of people are choosing to work longer because they are in good shape. They have better health, they have an active lifestyle. And then many of us are also, many of the older folks are also choosing to work longer by necessity. Because the simplest reason is finances. So a recent survey showed that a lot of baby boomers have very little saved. Another bigger concern is, how do you support 30 to 40 years of retirement on savings from a 30 to 40 year long career? So it's not surprising that a lot of people don't have saved a lot for a long retirement. And another concern is that employers want to retain the knowledge that the older employees have. Older employees tend to have a lot of critical skills, such as relationship building, social networks. So all those skills are embodied in the older employees. So employers don't want to lose that human capital. So many more individuals are working past 60 plus. Then on the other hand, we are in the age of technology. So I Googled recently and found that 8 out of 10 most valuable firms worldwide are tech firms. We need data analysis for pretty much everything we do. Digital intelligence is no longer a desirable, good to have skill. It has become a critical skill. Most jobs today need digital intelligence. And who is better at it? The younger individuals. They grew up with technology, so they are quite good with anything digital. The workplace increasingly needs digital intelligence and leadership competencies and life experiences. So as a result, the workforce has become amazingly diverse. For the first time in history, we have 5 generations working side by side. Millennials are right now the largest group, accounting for almost 35% of the US workforce. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to focus more on the US because this is more proximal for all of us. But around the world, the results are fairly similar. So Generation Xers, which is my generation, that is the next largest group, followed by baby boomers. Baby boomers, until recently, were the largest group. They started retiring in the last 3 years, and already millennials have taken over. And Generation Z started working in last 3-4 years, and they are beginning to now make their presence felt. And traditionalists or silent generation as a small representation in the workforce. So we do have all 5 generations in the workplace. And this is showing up in many ways. So no matter where you go, more in some industries than in the others, you notice a lot of age-based diversity. And you also notice newer things such as older people reporting to much younger individuals. So diversity, there is a lot of research on the outcomes of diversity. And research shows that when managed well, a diverse workforce leads to better problem solving, more flexible organization, an organization that is more creative, more innovative, which ultimately leads to better performance. On the other hand, if not managed well, then diversity can lead to all sorts of negative outcomes, which usually come out of intergroup conflicts and a hostile workplace. So in this presentation, I'm going to focus on only age-related issues. So you might have heard of ageism, which is prejudice against those who are older. Now there is a new phenomena across the workplace in the US and around the world, which is called youngism. So Dr. North has done a lot of research in this area. And his research earlier just focused on ageism, which was prejudice against the older and how it created all sorts of negative outcomes for the older individuals. Such as not being hired, not getting promoted, facing an increasingly unwelcoming workplace. So all those fall under the umbrella of outcomes of ageism. But now there is also a phenomena called youngism. So what that refers to is across the world, in the workplaces, the young are also being treated with suspicion. Most workplaces are used to having age-based hierarchy because you work your way up. And now suddenly, thanks to technology and thanks to the younger being more savvy with technology, suddenly the young are appearing at different levels of hierarchy, not necessarily in the order of age. So the young are being treated with suspicion. Sometimes they are being forced to follow age-based hierarchy and so on. So age-based discrimination is happening both on the basis of being older and also on the basis of being younger. So this is a very unique situation in the workplace. So how to lead such a diverse workforce? So the principles of diversity management still hold. Even though this is a unique type of situation, still the classic principles of managing your workforce, classic principles of diversity management, they still hold true. What that means is you have to recognize that each employee is unique. Each employee has a distinct needs, set of needs, goals, and aspirations. And each employee forms a unique psychological contract which resides up here. It's not written anywhere. So each employee forms a unique contract with the employer. What that means is each of us has a perception of what do I owe to my employer and what do they owe me back. So that is a unique psychological contract. It resides in the employee's mind, and it consists of mutual obligations and expectations. And it's very powerful. There is a lot of research in this area that shows this contract starts developing as early as just looking at the job ad. And once this contract has been formed, it has major implications for all employee outcomes. So regardless of their age, all employees form unique psychological contracts, and that needs to be fulfilled. But is it possible to fulfill potentially conflicting contracts? So it's possible a young person is looking for an employer who will give a lot of technology. At the same time, an older employee in the same organization may be looking for more classic ways of communication, more classic ways of day-to-day work, and so on. So there is a conflict right there. So is it possible to fulfill these potentially conflicting needs and maintain fairness in the organization? Before we delve into that, let's first talk about what are these 5 generations. So traditionalists or silent generation, they are now 75 plus. These individuals were born into the Great Depression and World War II environments. Consistently, research has shown them to be dependable and loyal. Their communication preferences were mostly face-to-face or letters, paper pen based, phone, and so on. And these individuals typically looked for stability and long-term careers. The idea was I will join the organization and I will grow my career there, more linear careers. And then came the baby boomer generation. So baby boomers are 55 plus now. These individuals were born in the era of Korea and Vietnam wars. This is the counterculture generation. This generation is known for its optimism and competitiveness. Their communication preferences also included, in addition to face-to-face and phone, also included email. And this generation is known to be achievement-oriented. So work really long hours, career-focused, achievement-focused. Then came my generation, which is Generation X. So we are 40 plus. We are born in the era of globalization, rising divorce rates, AIDS pandemic, also known, sometimes the Generation X is called sandwich generation. It's also known as the cable TV generation. There are many names. Also, I would like to point out that depending on where you are looking, the generational differences will vary slightly. So some people will say Generation X is 1960 to 1980. Some will say it's 1965 to 1985. But broadly, there are these 5 generations. And worldwide, again, the years will vary just a little. So Generation X was the first generation where work-family balance or work-life balance, as we say now, became important. Generation X was the first generation that decided if my needs are not being met, I will change my job. Communication preferences, email became more common for this generation. And this generation is primarily motivated by fulfilling its interests and work-life balance. And millennials came next, so 25 plus. The oldest millennials are now in their early 40s. So these individuals were born in the era of dot-com revolution, outsourcing, and prosperity. Parenting, helicopter parenting had already started. So more nurturing parents, more educated parents. So millennials generally tend to be more college educated compared to all the previous generations. Millennials, research shows, tend to be more competitive, but also very civic minded. And their communication preferences, while they include email, they also lean heavily towards chat, text, and other asynchronous modes of communication. This generation is motivated by personal attention and feedback, smart goals, and flexibility, among many other motivators. And then there is Generation Z. So I have three kids who are all part of this generation. So I have some familiarity with this. Also, many of my students, they are either millennials or Generation Z. So I am quite familiar with both generations. And I have to say this, I am extremely biased towards both of these generations because of the great experiences I have had. So Generation Z, the oldest, are now 25, 26. These individuals were born in the era of mortgage crisis, financial scandals running amok everywhere. These individuals were also born in the age of social media and sharing economy. So Airbnb, Uber, all these things, these individuals have known from an early age. Parenting definitely became more helicopter, and college pretty much became mandatory for this generation. This generation is known as a generation of really progressive, embracing of diversity of all sorts, and global citizens. And their communication preferences definitely are mostly asynchronous. This generation doesn't want to, there is all sorts of research. I have done some research in this area myself, and pretty much this generation doesn't like meeting face-to-face unless they need to. They would first try asynchronous methods, such as Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, simple IM, Slack, whatever, asynchronous. And they are again motivated. They are similar to millennials in that they also need personalized attention and feedback, and they value independence, creativity, and flexibility. So let me show you a very short clip. I'm going to not show you the whole thing. Sorry about that.
Hi, Drew. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming in. So before we start this interview, just want to talk to you to see how you're doing. What things are you interested in?
Of course. I'm really into photography, and lately I've been upping my game and getting really into my craft. I'm really into videography, and lately I've been getting a lot of positive response. I'm also a foodie, you know, I really like to go out and experience the culture and try new restaurants. And I'm passionate about engaging in the community and being a social justice warrior.
Wow, that's quite the life there. Can you tell me a little bit maybe about your personal experience?
Of course, I have excellent leadership skills and people really like me. Also, I have a very healthy competitive drive and I don't like to lose. I mean, I just don't lose. Actually, I'm a pretty successful social entrepreneur. And on top of all that, I have a strong track record of building a successful team.
Wow, that's quite the list of executive achievements. Can you share a little bit about your education?
Well, I have quite the academic pedigree. While I was in school, I participated in the psychology program. And And I'm also a charter member of an influential community engagement organization. And finally, I spend a lot of time studying digital communication.
That's awesome. That sounds like you're a perfect fit. What about your skill sets? What would you say the things that you're really good at?
Well, for starters, I'm bilingual. I have quite the reputation of being somewhat of a gourmet chef.
Thanks for your time. It was really nice to meet you. We'll be in touch.
So jokes aside, there are a lot of stereotypes about millennials and Generation Z. So as we saw in the short video clip, these individuals are considered difficult to communicate with. Face-to-face interaction is preferred by older generations, whereas both millennials and Generation Z, they do not prefer face-to-face. So as a result, the older generations complain that the younger generations are difficult to communicate with. Because there is so much asynchronous media going on, they are considered to have short attention span. Another stereotype is they need too much hand-holding. They need a lot of instructions, a lot of detail. Another regular complaint is this generation needs instant gratification. They are narcissistic, disrespectful. Some say they are entitled, lazy radicals. Now, here is something funny. Older generations, basically the silent / traditionalist generation, have described baby boomers in exactly the same manner. So Deal et al. Say that beliefs about whichever younger generation is entering the workforce have remained remarkably stable over the past 40 years. So each time there is a new generation entering the workforce, the older generation always criticizes. And all these stereotypes start afresh. Now, I don't want you to think that there are no stereotypes about the older generations. So when I talk to my students or my own children or other young friends, and there is also substantial research on ageism. So all of that shows that the older generations are considered old, inflexible. We are considered set in our ways and not willing to learn. Even if the older people are willing to learn, they are slow. They have a tough time learning or adapting. So those are some stereotypes. But what are the truths? So let's talk about some truths about millennials. So millennials tend to be tech savvy. They use technology for multitasking. They are also higher on self-esteem and assertiveness, and a little bit on narcissism. Dr. Twenge has done a lot of research in this area, and her research has shown that this generation is definitely very assertive. However, I also want to point out that most of these studies are based on data from college students, which doesn't represent the full US population of millennials. So yeah, the college-educated millennials tend to be higher on self-esteem and assertiveness. Compared to past generations, work seems to be less central to their lives. And again, the caveat is because millennials and Zs are not as high up in their organizations, they don't need to work that many hours. Because typically, as you go up the corporate ladder, as your position becomes higher, you tend to start working higher hours. So research that suggests baby boomers worked more, it may not have accounted for this fact that the millennials and Zs are just not high enough yet. Millennials are no more job hoppers than Generation Xers. So there is some research done by Pew Research Center, and that shows millennials are fairly close to Generation Xers in terms of job hopping, which means if their needs are not being fulfilled, they will change jobs. And millennials are definitely very focused on work-life balance through location and schedule flexibility. They also desire participative leadership, more democratic leadership, and feedback. So millennials are typically attracted to open types of company cultures. What that means is a culture of transparency, a culture of regular and extensive communication. On the negative side, there is some research that shows compared to previous generations, millennials have higher rates of obesity and less overall fitness, which has implications in the workplace. Now let's talk about Generation Z. So Generation Z grew up with technology. So tech is part of their identity. They are also known as digital natives. They are used to connecting with their peers online to share stories, ideas, and concerns. Remember, this is the Snapchat and Insta generation. They prefer short, asynchronous communication, but they are also open to face-to-face communication as needed. So I had done a communication study a couple of years ago, and I interviewed a number of engineers who were all part of Generation Z. And they all said, my first preference is, or my first go-to is, I will, when I have to share a lot of information, I'll do it over email. When I have to share a little bit of information, I will do it over Slack, which is a popular communication medium in workplace. And if I have a question that cannot be easily answered through either method, then I would go and talk to the person. And this generation, because these individuals were born during the mortgage crisis, the dot-com bust, and so on. So they are likely to be risk averse. They have seen a lot as children. They also tend to be values driven, and above all, they really want to make a difference. They want to make a mark on the world. And they also desire, not only they desire, but they also expect work-life balance. In fact, in this generation, they have started talking about life-work balance. Why should work take priority over life? This generation is all about boundaryless work. What that means is they will change careers several times, and they will change career in non-linear ways. So for the older generations, silent boomers and Xers, careers were largely all about growing in one industry, growing in one organization in a fairly linear manner. But for millennials and Zs, it's no longer the same. They will change careers several times, and they might change in very non-traditional ways. So I changed my career several times, and I used to think I'm pretty unique, but turns out I'm just more similar to millennials and Zs. So I changed from engineering to product management to academia. So that is fairly non-linear. I traversed several industries, and I went between industry, school, back to industry, and so on. So for millennials and Zs, that seems to be more common than ever before for any other generation. And Zs look for directions, empathy, and feedback. So they seek jobs that offer learning and growth opportunities. Just giving them ping pong tables and free beer is not enough. I mean, they like that. Who doesn't? But this generation is not all about that. This generation is all about jobs where they will get clear directions, they will be heard, and they will have opportunities to learn and keep growing. So how do we lead a workforce that has all 5 generations? Again, the prescriptions are not that unique. So diversity management has been researched a lot, and the principles of diversity management hold true for a multi-generational workforce. So first thing is, when you are managing a multi-generational workforce, you have to recognize that you have biases. So you might want to take a test to recognize your biases. So there is a test called implicit attitude test. You might want to start with that and see if you are biased against a particular age group or a particular generation. So recognizing our biases is only the first step, but it is a critical first step. Once you have recognized your biases and once you become open to the idea that, hey, I have some biases. So remember, I started this presentation by saying, I am biased towards the young, because I have had, even though I'm not part of millennials or Z generation, because I have such great experiences with both of these generations, I am biased towards them. So that recognition is the first step, because I know I am biased towards them. When I'm recruiting or when I'm promoting, there is a possibility that I might give preference to a millennial or a Generation Z person compared to a person of my generation or a baby boomer or silent generation. So I need to take care of that. I need to address that bias. Otherwise, that can create all sorts of problems in the workplace. So recognizing our bias is the first step, and then addressing the bias takes a lot of practice. So in the workplace, we need to make sure that not only we recognize, but we set up processes to address these biases. That can be done in several ways. So when we are hiring, we should use structured interviews. So that way everybody goes through the same interview. We should also have multiple opinions. So instead of one person doing all the interviews, have multiple people from different age groups do the interview and seek everyone's opinion. So that will address the bias. Also, just having very clear job description based on a job analysis goes a long way in addressing bias. So I'm not going to focus on recruitment and promotion here. Here, I'm going to talk more broadly on how to manage a multi-generational workforce. So management needs to make sure, or senior leadership needs to make sure that all groups, regardless of their age, have equal status in the organization. Everyone feels included. That means sometimes you have to cold call. Sometimes you have to push some team members to make sure everybody is getting heard. Senior management also needs to create institutional support for contact between groups. Senior management also needs to develop group norms that will support constructive interaction. Basically, create a culture where everyone feels respected. No type of disrespect is allowed in the workplace. So if the upper management is doing that, then that kind of culture runs throughout the organization. And above all, establish common goals to yield cooperation, and talk less, listen more. Everyone, regardless of what age group, what generation they are from, everyone wants to be heard. So listen to your workforce, do a lot of surveys and types of assessment to figure out what they are thinking, what do they need. Set appropriate expectations clearly and early on. So when the relationship is beginning, that's when it's the leadership's job to explain roles, responsibilities, and expectations. Offer detailed instructions and feedback. Don't assume your employees are similar to you. Don't fall prey to self-similarity. So just because I'm a Generation Xer and just because I communicate in certain ways, I never assume my students are going to do the same. I think about what are their communication preferences. How can I give them instructions so they will understand? And I continually seek their feedback to improve further. I also give them detailed feedback so they know what my expectations are. Also apply active listening techniques. This never gets old. Active listening has been around, the idea of active listening has been around forever, and it's a great idea. It works across all generations. So also always seek feedback to ensure understanding. Do anonymous polls, ask the other party to repeat what you said without being condescending. And when you are giving feedback, be very specific. What was done right? How can something be improved? The more details you give, the better it will be. When you have older employees, you have to be, I mean, actually, regardless of what generation you are dealing with, everyone wants to be treated with respect. So another thing is, with the younger employees, millennials and Zs, praise is very important. But you have to offer sincere praise. Good job or great job or awesome doesn't go anywhere. You have to find things to praise very specifically. So Drew, the presentation you made, I really liked it because you covered all the bases. Your slides were really nice to look at. You didn't put too much text. You also thought about my preferences. You didn't put colored letters on a black background, which is hard to read. So give sincere praise. Be as specific as you can be. And with millennials and Zs especially, it's very important to stick to SMART goals. Use language that they will understand. Both generations are practical, so don't talk in broad, abstract terms. Think of applications. Find common meanings that is relate to their goals and cultures. And above all, be respectful. So don't make jokes about age. Don't resort to any types of stereotypes, because that will offend all generations. Create diversity in work teams. So try to pair up people from the older generation, that is silent boomers and Xers, with younger generation, that is Zs and millennials. That will enhance diversity of ideas, and everyone will end up learning something new. Everyone will be happier. And apply participative and collaborative approaches. So I remember when I did my communication study, one of the Generation Z engineers said, the older engineers in my firm are subject matter experts, but they seem reluctant to learn new tech. Even when they have to, they seem to take longer and they seem to stumble. So older employees can have a younger buddy. Older employees can be encouraged to ask questions. And at the same time, older employees can offer subject matter expertise. But key is, upper leadership has to realize that the younger employees, if they are training the older employees, the younger employees should be given credit for that. It shouldn't become a burden on the younger employees, because the young ones are new to the firm and they can't easily object. At the same time, the older employees should not be made to feel slow and stupid. So again, establishing a culture of respect is critical. Communication should be democratized. So start by assessing preferences. Offer multiple methods of communication so no one feels left out. Email, IM, Insta, Slack, whatever. Check with everyone and offer communication through multiple ways. Offer training so everyone is familiar with all these different ways to communicate. Follow up in multiple ways, because average employee gets at least 140 mails plus spam every day. Good idea to follow up on an email with a text. Like, if sometimes when I email a student and I haven't heard back, I will follow up. I have created a social media group for my class to communicate with. Also choose mediums that will allow for repeat viewing. So if you are communicating on IM or Insta, then you should also establish a blog or a frequently asked questions page or a repository where you are keeping all information. Otherwise, there is so much information flying around that most of us are suffering from information overload. So having a repeat viewing method really helps. There is some evidence that the average employee works for about 3 minutes before they get interrupted. Another thing I cannot stress enough, offer socializing opportunities, both during office time and outside. So create situations so people just have to interact with other age groups. Generation Z, there is some evidence that they will seek face-to-face interactions when they become comfortable with older colleagues. So the more you force them to interact, so set up lunches in a way, maybe offer free food. So that way everybody will sit together and eat. But choose the venues and activities carefully so they appeal across all generations. Diversity training is also a must. So again, diversity training should be offered to all generations. And offer professional development. Professional development is critical for all generations because there is substantial research that shows the younger employees feel like they don't have the leadership skills, they don't have the emotional intelligence, and many other skills that come with life experience. On the other hand, the older employees feel that they might get outdated because technology is growing at such a breakneck pace. So both the older and younger generations need different types of training. So offer training to everyone. That's all I had. And now I am ready for any questions.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We do have a couple of questions. So the first, Trina asked if you could share a link to the video, or if it's okay if people email you and you can share the link to the video as well. So the first question is, are there any industries that are more age diverse than others?
So tech comes to mind right away. The high-tech industry has a lot more, high-tech industry has a lot more younger people, but at the same time, they also have older people. So Google, for example, the median age is probably less than 30. I haven't Googled that today, so I don't know the exact number, but the average Googler seems to be a young person, a young millennial or a Generation Z. But at the same time, Google does have a lot of Generation X, probably some baby boomers. And Google is just one tech company. There are many others. So I would say tech is fairly diverse. Consumer products tend to be more diverse than tech. Tech industry leans more towards youth because they need so much newer technologies that that they tend to hire more younger people. Also, the turnover is probably higher in tech compared to other industries. Consumer products is more stable. So places like Pepsi and Kellogg, they have more diversity. But the phenomena of ageism, that is discrimination against older employees, is driving a lot of older employees out, even from consumer product companies.
Thank you. And Sandra had a question. What are your views regarding the impact on the leadership style in leading a multi-generational workforce?
So leadership style has to match the workforce expectations. So what that means is, if you are leading, when you are leading a multi-generational workforce, you have to fulfill everyone's needs. You can't just cater to Generation Z and leave everyone else behind. That is where it gets really tricky. So as I said in my talk, you have to think about everyone's unique needs, and you have to do things keeping everyone in mind. So something really simple. How do we communicate? So you cannot insist on face-to-face meetings all the time, because while that will please the baby boomers and some Generation Xers, it will make your millennials and Generation Z really unhappy. So offer meetings both online and face-to-face. I mean, there is no reason why meetings can't happen in hybrid mode. You don't have to communicate only face-to-face and over phone. There is no reason why why we can't communicate on all different ways. So really simple things matter. How to design the office layout. So the younger generation is used to an open layout. I grew up with, I'm the cubicle generation. I had a cubicle with high walls. And then as I grew in my career, I moved into an office. I had a room with a door, and I really liked it. I liked having my privacy. So you have to think about, what does each generation need? And can I do it without creating unfairness?
Great, thank you. That actually, I just moved into an office with a door, so I understand what you mean. And Martin had a question. With younger people having non-linear careers, has there been any research on how the middle management workforce will be filled in the future?
Well, so right now we are going through a very interesting phenomena. So in tech, for example, a lot of older people are reporting to younger people, because I mean, for example, take artificial intelligence. It's a very new area. So a typical expert tends to be younger. So computers overall are, I mean, really, the workforce tends to be much younger. So a lot of people are beginning to say that 30 is the new age to be senior management, or 40 is the new age to be senior management. It used to be more like 50 or 60. So upper management, we are talking about middle management. So I would say it depends. So in some industries, middle management will be very mixed. It will be all generations. In some industries, the young will rule the roost, unless the older generations are given opportunity to upskill. So as long as the older generations, really, it's a question of how much do organizations want to invest in the human capital? Because we are, as a nation, we are getting older. So if we don't nurture our older generations, if we don't create a friendly workplace for them, it's not going to work out. Because whether we like it or not, the older generations have to work longer. We have reached that point. If we are going to, like I always tell my children, I'm going to live till I'm 100, and I'm going to work till I'm 80. Right now, I'm in my early 50s, and I'm like, I'm going to work for at least 25 more years. My father worked till he was about 75. His father worked till the age of 55. So I have to beat my dad. I have to work at least till I'm 80. So, but unless IIT supports me, I'm not going to be able to do it. So IIT has to allow me to continually upskill myself. For example, when we started teaching online, we were given special training for that. So unless the employers are willing to create a an environment of respect, an environment of continuous learning and support, older people won't be able to do it. So to answer the question, middle management will become full of only young people if organizations are not careful. And if that situation arises, it's not going to work out well for anyone, because the younger generation is definitely looking for life-work balance. So they will not, they are not going to put long work hours and get burnt out. And the older generation, they might need to work for money or just because they don't want to retire. And if they are being forced in the lower ranks, they won't be happy either. So employers really need to think about professional development across the board.
Great, thank you so much. If anyone else has any final questions, now is the time to type them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much. This was incredibly informative. So just a reminder for everyone, this presentation was recorded and it will be available on our website in the next couple of weeks. And then our next Alumni University session is already posted at iat.edu/alumni university. And that will be with Kim Irwin, I believe on March 23rd. So please check back on our website for that. And thank you again.